Welcome to this episode of Life Science Success. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don Davis, and I am a digital marketer. And before we get into our interview today with Bill Bullock, I wanted to just play a quick message from our sponsor.
Episode of Life Science Success is brought to you by D3 Digital Media Marketing. Dive into the digital world with confidence and creativity on your side. D3 Digital Media Marketing is your all-in-one solution for making a lasting impact online. From the vibrant, engaging world of social media marketing, podcasts, and webinars, to the strategic depths of website development, SEO, pay-per-click, email, and content marketing, we tailor our approach to fit your unique brand story. Let's elevate your presence, connect with your audience, and drive success together. Your digital journey starts here. Visit d3digitalmedia.com to learn more.
And so with that, I'm pleased to be joined today by Bill Bullock. He's a key member of the senior executive team at NCBiotech with extensive experience in life science, economic development, biotechnology consulting, and research. Bill leads statewide initiatives to foster growth in North Carolina's thriving life science ecosystem. And so with that, welcome, Bill.
Yeah, thanks, Don. Appreciate the opportunity. Looking forward to having a chat.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. And I'm trying to think back in my memory. I don't think I've had anybody else from Research Triangle Park or, anybody else from North Carolina's developing life sciences ecosystem yet. I've had plenty of interviews, I would say, in your neighbors, areas. So Atlanta is a good example.
Right.
Certainly have had plenty of conversations in Boston, but it's great to have you on, and I look forward to just our conversation here about things. Just to get us kicked off, would you mind taking a minute and telling the listeners just a little bit about yourself and what sort of led you to this line of work?
Yeah, sure. It's always a interesting conversation because as a life sciences economic developer, I don't think any kid says, "Wow, when I grow up, I want to do life sciences economic development." I'm a Southern California boy, born and raised in San Diego. Had a great middle school teacher. Thank you, Mrs. Murphy, who really got me interested in biology. And so when I graduated from high school, I went to UC San Diego and ended up getting a degree in biochemistry and cell biology. And this is, I'm going to date myself here a little bit. So we're talking early to mid 80s, but if you think about kind of where the life sciences industry was and biotech was, it was really just starting to explode right then. So my timing was really good. And coming out of college, I got a job at a startup in San Diego that really focused on, it was one of the first companies that really started translating a lot of the genetic engineering technologies into a more kitted platform. So instead of having to go and figure out how to do sequencing in the lab and do all your cloning things, we would create a kit for those things. So, when you're a young undergraduate and you come out and all of a sudden you're thrown into this company and you get to do all these different things, it was a really great environment to learn a lot. Ran a transgenic mouse lab there for a little while. Decided I needed to go back to school. That was fun. I didn't want to be a tech forever. And that's what brought me to North Carolina many years ago. So I went and got an MBA at UNC Chapel Hill and then spent a lot of time working in a consulting firm, spent a little time in the government here working all of this related to biotech, and then spent a little time actually at the Biotech Center. Actually, my first job out of my MBA program was a couple of years here way back in the day. So anyway, all that to say, I had this really keen interest in biology, business, and then through all of that got exposed to a number of these economic development projects, really liked the world of how we would translate the science into economic impact, and then happened upon an opportunity to help build out an economic development team here at the Biotech Center 20 years ago. And here I am still today, having a great time.
No, so I think it's an important part of describing the journey. It's funny. I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday that was talking about being on the podcast, and essentially, this individual saying, "Hey, look, I don't know if I'm the right person to have on. I'm not a founder. I'm not a CEO. And I said, look, if you listen to a few more episodes, maybe you haven't listened to enough yet to kind of catch somebody that's not a founder, not a CEO. But I mean, more or less, this is an opportunity to, highlight what's going on at your company, but also, talk about your career journey, because there are a lot of people that are out there that I feel like go, hey, look, I'm locked into this and I can't veer one way or the other. Sure, you got a business degree, and that probably opened up a few more doors to look more broadly at things. But it is interesting that essentially you had to focus on biology, and now you do economic development. I mean, who would have thought?
Yeah, and it's I mentioned Mrs. Murphy. She probably isn't watching the podcast, but what this has really allowed me to do is, I think the thread through all of what I've done is just innate fascination with biology, right? And I think that's what honestly still kind of drives me today. I'm fascinated with the biological systems and how elegant they are, and spending a career in this over 40 years and seeing how much we've done to figure out how to leverage those systems to do everything, right? To help human health, to help a lot of the challenges in the planet, to help feed the planet. And then really all this is focusing those efforts now into how do we translate those here in North Carolina into economic benefit for the residents of the state, as well as the ancillary benefits of what the science can do for them. So it's a lot of fun. I'm very, very, very lucky.
I would imagine, though, that your background probably has to help, as well. I mean, just in terms of being able to translate, the business side on the biotechnology side, as well as the, hey, look, here's a great reason, why to, spend time here.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of what my side of the Biotechnology Center does is really that intersection of the science with the business. I kind of think of this 4P model that we do a lot of our economic development around, right? It's product, it's process, it's people, and it's place. And so it's a little bit of a model of how I think about our journey here, right? You gotta stay focused on the science and understand the technology and the implications of that, both good and bad. But as we'll talk more, particularly here, when you're thinking about economic development, is you want to think about not just what good things the science can do, but how do you build an ecosystem that allows that technology to translate into jobs and economic impact for the citizens of the state of North Carolina, right? So that's the process piece. Fortunately for North Carolina, what we're really good at is we're good innovators, but the legacy of the state as a manufacturing state is we're really, really good at translating those innovations to products and services. And so I'm grateful to do this job in North Carolina because we're good at all those things. So it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you describe your role currently at NCBiotech, and, what does it entail? And then what are some of your responsibilities as well?
Yeah, so the center I'll give my 40. We're 40 years old this year, so we're celebrating our 40th anniversary. And the center was really built around this perspective in the mid to early 80s, right? So go back again. This is kind of really the dawn of the biotech revolution from an industrial perspective. And so the Biotech Center was created originally to help our universities move technology along to something that could be commercialized and then provide early money in to get those technologies out of the university. We still do that. My role when I came here at the center, though, is because the industry was evolving here in North Carolina and frankly globally, right? So this whole idea of that's great, creating startups and commercializing technology is what you want to do so it can actually have some benefit to mankind. But we were starting to think then about how do we grow that into economic benefit here in the state. So my job was to come here and kind of create that program. And really what we've done now is evolve those core programs around innovation investment. And now we've built a whole economic development group to that. So all of that is to build this whole tech-based economic development strategy at the center. So my groups focus on that growth part, right? So we have an economic development team. We have a corporate communications and branding team. We are a statewide organization, so my responsibilities are also to help oversee our statewide offices. We have 5 individual offices. And then more recently, we've added a couple other components. So our impact criteria focus on that innovation and investment in jobs. And now more recently, because again, the science has evolved, the industry has evolved, so the center is taking more of an active role in thinking about what opportunities exist out there from larger coalition-based activities that we can help bring together, and what solutions can we help the state solve through life sciences. So my role is really to have those teams that are focused on company growth and building that ecosystem through workforce development, infrastructure development, and connecting that to create jobs.
And then I guess if we focus on NCBiotech for a minute, what is the mission of NCBiotech, and how does the organization overall, work towards achieving the goals?
Yeah, so our mission is really to build an ecosystem for life sciences in North Carolina. That's really the mission, and to do that through education, to do that through science, and to do that by support for all the institutions and organizations in the state that build up that ecosystem. Our vision is North Carolina as a global life sciences leader, right? So it's a big vision, and one that we take really seriously. How we do that, again, is a little bit through what I call this tech-based economic development process, these 5 impact criteria that we focus on, right? So we have a team that focuses on innovation. We focus on investment, early stage risk capital investment. We focus on job creation. And then more recently, given that, to take advantage of some of the opportunities in life sciences and to solve some of the big problems that we face really requires a little more complicated solution than it may have in the past. It's great to fund good research, but now we're building coalitions of partners, and as we see this integration of science, engineering, and data science really coming to bear on a lot of these things, the center's becoming more responsive to that. So where we're going, Don, is we have these groups within the center, again, that focus on these individual parts of the ecosystem. Where we're going to go is how we bring those groups together to help pursue unique opportunities and solve some problems for the state. And when I say bring the center together, I mean bringing all the elements of the ecosystem. Our investment group has great relationships with the university and understands what's going there around innovation. Our emerging company development group understands the risk capital markets and understands the angel and venture and public markets. Our economic development team really has great connectivity to the economic development sector. So as we come together, we're going to bring those folks together and create a really good system in North Carolina to tackle some really complicated things that we know are coming and that life sciences can really play a role in.
I think that's a really important point, because it's not easy to read the tea leaves of where's life sciences going, what's coming next, and then as you rightly mentioned a while ago in one of your answers, look, it takes us a little while to get things in place and do things inside of life sciences as well, and so I would imagine that there's all sorts of levels of activity. We were talking before the show. You had said that the Research Triangle Park, idea, was something that's, was a 60-year-old, idea at this point. And it's an amazing thing to think that, you rewind the clock 60 years ago and start to think about, this is something that would be important and will be an important, area for businesses to develop in this area, both from a university perspective, but also just in general, from a life sciences support perspective. So it can't be easy, reading those things and knowing what's coming at you either.
Yeah, absolutely. We're really fortunate. We are primarily funded by an appropriation from the state, and we're really grateful for that, and that's been the case for 40 years. So we've had an opportunity to learn a lot about how to do that in an effective way. Um, Don, you mentioned kind of the 60 plus year legacy. I was not born and raised in North Carolina. I came from California to North Carolina, but I've spent half my life here. And what's not lost on me that I think gets at what you're talking about is, when you go back to the mid to the late 50s here in North Carolina, it was literally one of the poorest states in the country, right? And so this vision, which just was incredible at the time and place, to look at a state in that circumstance and think, hey, you know what? By 2024, we're going to be a top life science state in the U.S. It takes an incredible amount of vision. And, I think about these kind of 20-year tranches of what it takes to do this. So if you go back 60 plus years to that first vision around Research Triangle Park, well, 20 years later was, in the early 80s was the creation of the Biotech Center and some other entities here in North Carolina, right? And so, the center is really just one partner in this huge ecosystem that's built to success here. But then it took about another 20 years for us to build out the infrastructure in North Carolina. And then in around 2000, we had kind of another step change around investments, particularly around manufacturing, right? This legacy of manufacturing. So we built some infrastructure at some of our universities focused really on bioprocessing and biomanufacturing. We connected a lot of our community colleges together in a really unique way so that we had this foundation of workforce development that focused really on biomanufacturing. And now here we are another 20 plus years later. And what you and I will talk about is this incredible growth, particularly around the life science manufacturing side in North Carolina. So the benefit for the center is we've been this consistent piece of that puzzle, and the community has kind of grown up with the biotech center. And so we've been able to take those learnings with us all along the way. And I think we're there again, right? I think you and I were talking before the start of the show. Just the opportunity and potential again of the technology and where it's going. So I'm really excited. I won't be able to do this forever, but I'm excited about what we have on the horizon in North Carolina.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that leads us to a good point for my next question, which is, could you elaborate a little bit around some of the innovative projects or initiatives that NCBiotech is currently working on?
Yeah, sure. I'll dip my toe in a few of those. I want to give you a couple of numbers to preface this part of the conversation. As you and I were chatting about, one of the things that North Carolina has, it's been really fortuitous, is we've been able to build out capability in a kind of a diverse array of applications for life sciences. So how the technology of how biotechnology and life science innovation is being applied is to human health and biopharmaceuticals. We're really strong in clinical research. We're really strong in agricultural biotechnology. We're really strong in medical testing and lab testing, right? So all these found industrial biotechnology. Novo Nordisk is here, one of the global leaders in industrial biotech. So this broad application has allowed the center to focus on some fundamental pieces. We're really good at innovating. We have really great R1 institutions here in North Carolina that bring a lot of public funding in. But what we're really, really good at is translating those innovations into products and services. That is that manufacturing legacy of North Carolina. And what you and I talked about earlier, Don, this kind of proactive endeavor to build a life sciences ecosystem has really built a very collaborative community here. And I think that's a real competitive advantage for the state as we're going and doing this. I say all that because that is the foundation around which we're doing a whole number of different projects, right? All those areas are growing, but the one that has really been exploding is around biomanufacturing. Literally in the last not even 5 years, since the beginning of 2020, so that's 4.5 years, we've had 115 announcements. So these would either be companies announcing growth or companies coming into our market new. Over half of those are in manufacturing. Those 115 projects have announced the creation of over 16,000 new jobs, and over 70% of those jobs relate to manufacturing. And then of those 115 projects, the announced investment is over $18 billion. So that's in 4.5 years, and over 90% of that investment is in manufacturing. So that's good and bad. So my point in all of that is some of the projects we're doing are focusing around that huge boom in manufacturing. So we led a coalition around something called the EDA Build Back Better, our regional challenge grant program, and brought about $25 million into our community colleges, our HBCUs, to focus on workforce development around life sciences manufacturing. So that's a big project that we're working on that we're excited about, because it's going to provide an opportunity for a lot of folks who wouldn't see themselves working in life sciences, who don't even know that a manufacturing career is in their purview, to get into all these new jobs we're going to create. We're working on some projects. There's these manufacturing innovation institutes, these MIIs. These are programs that have been set up through the federal government to focus on areas of interest around semiconductors and other areas that relate to areas of need in the U.S. So there's a couple of those focused in life sciences. There's one called Nimble that's focused on pharmaceutical manufacturing, and we have some really interesting programs going on there that relate to workforce development that we're doing in collaboration with some of our partners. And there's a new one called BioMade, which is focused on industrial biotechnology and how we build that capacity more here in the U.S. especially. And we're working on a couple of very interesting projects with them as well. So, well, I could spend the whole show talking about our cool projects, but those are a few that we've got going on right now at the center that we're excited about.
I mean, the interesting part to me about the 4-year milestone, right? So, I mean, think of where we are today versus, where we were 4 years ago. And essentially we were in the midst of COVID, trying to figure out what all the sickness was and, everything that was happening, in 2020. And to me, I feel like there was a real awakening as well in terms of how much things were outsourced around the world, and sort of thinking about the fact that, with so much outsourcing, when there's a pandemic, how do we still manage and control a certain amount of things? Whether that's the reality of alignment or not. I mean, to me, right, mentally, that's what I instantly went back to, is like, okay, well, this makes a lot of sense to me that, essentially we're starting to see more and more companies, interested in continually expanding here. I think the other thing, I mean, and this is not related necessarily, is I feel like there's a lot of new innovations with regards to manufacturing of pharmaceuticals as well. And those innovations probably also are spurring some things as well. But it brings me kind of to my next question as well, which is that, and I'm going to read the numbers here that I have on my, my prep notes. So it was the first half of 2024 has been amazing. You've announced really big deals. Novo Nordisk being $4.1 billion with 1,000 jobs. FUJIFILM Diosynth Biotechnologies $1.2 billion, 680 jobs. Kyowa Kirin $530 million, 102 jobs. Schott Pharma $371 million, 400 jobs, and most recently Nipro Medical $398, 232 jobs. So I mean, whenever you're talking about things, these are real numbers in dollars, but also real numbers in jobs, and just an amazing thing Can you tell me more about, how has this impacted the overall ecosystem there?
Yeah, and I want to point out that's just the first 6 months of this year. Those announcements have happened. So, um, well, first, I think it's an interesting exercise because this is I'll give you Bill's perspective on kind of how we got there in 4 years. Like what has led to this really unprecedented time for North Carolina's, particularly in manufacturing. And I think it was a bit of a perfect storm. And Don, it builds a little bit off of the whole story we were just talking about. Kind of the preparatory work. North Carolina is a manufacturing state. We're an innovation state, but we're a really good manufacturing state, right? And so this investment 20 years ago that said, hey, biomanufacturing is going to be a big deal and we need to invest in it. And the way we invested in it was through workforce. Now, don't get me wrong, North Carolina is a very business friendly state, and we can't understate the importance of that to attracting all of this biomanufacturing. And we were just rated the second best business climate, and the 2 years prior had been number one, right? So the business environment's really conducive to manufacturing. You take all these innovation assets of RTP and across the state, and again, it creates a really fluid environment for doing manufacturing. But if you look at what happened pre-COVID, right? So 2017, we had the first gene therapy products approved, right? So this kind of next revolution, and these kind of S curves that come, monoclonal showed up. It took us 20 years to figure it out, and now boom. And then, the next piece showed up, and then gene cell therapy showed up, and it took us 20 years to figure out how to bring it into the marketplace. But as soon as that happened, there was this pent up demand to manufacture, whether that was CDMO or people wanting to go and build their own infrastructure to do that. There's a lot of capital still at that point in the market, right? But there was a lot of manufacturing constraint. We didn't have enough capacity globally to make product, right? So there was already an opportunity kind of setting up. And then, as you said, boom, COVID hit. So that just layered on this whole other level of kind of supply chain concerns. The geopolitics were reigning in. All of that put an emphasis on a couple of things. One was speed to market, right? How do I get from A to B as quickly as I can, and how do I do it in the US? And it was the perfect storm for North Carolina. We had an existing labor shed already built up over the last 20 years that, we built these training programs. There was a recognition that we had talent and we could build talent. We were business friendly, and it was our moment. And we're still in that moment right now. So that's the good news. And I think a lot of the investments, I think too, this is what we were talking about earlier, right? Keeping our eye on the ball, right? GLP-1s have come along. So there's this massive expansion around diabetes and obesity products. Some of those big investments here, the Novo Nordisk, Eli Lilly, relate some to that. We've seen some really good movement in the oncology space, right? So there's new product opportunities there. You got to make that stuff somewhere, right? And I think we'll continue to see that in areas of large medical unmet needs. And so again, what the center does is we try to look into the future and think about what's coming and connect that back into our ecosystem here to prepare it for this moment like we did 60 years ago, 40 years ago, 20 years ago now. And so we got to think about how I won't be having this conversation with you in 20 years, but somebody having the one 20 years from now talking about the bioeconomy and how we're making everything using bio-based systems. That would be the hope.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's the retirement plan for you. Is you could continue to have the conversation, just not having to do so much of the hands-on as well.
There we go.
Right?
I like where you're going with that. Let's stay in touch.
So it's been a special year for North Carolina Biotech, a 40th anniversary. I understand that you were the first organization of its kind. Can you tell me a little bit more about sort of what were the fundamental, elements of, getting it started, and then, how has it been so successful?
Yeah, particularly given that I spent a couple of years at the Biotech Center in the early '90s. I do have people here as we celebrate the 40th. They look at me and they're like, "So, Bill, what was it like back in the '80s?" And I have to tell them, "Well, I was in the industry. I wasn't actually at the Biotech Center back then." But it's a wonderful perspective having been here for a few years. Back in the '90s, and then coming back again and being able to do all of this. I think the center, first of all, there's no replacement for leadership and vision, right? So I think the fact that the Biotech Center has been around for 40 years reflects vision on the part of the folks who set it up, who looked around. So I think we were created because at the time and place, people looking around and said, um, we want to continue to build this technology based economy in North Carolina, that transformation that 60 years ago, 40 years ago. We had really good innovation assets, right? We have UNC Chapel Hill, we have Duke, we have NC State, we have Wake Forest, we have ECU. So we have really good innovation assets. And I think people looked around and said, how do we jump onto this biotech train? Like, how do we do that in a way? We don't really, and this was the idea, which I think was great at the time, obviously. We have good research. We don't really need to build a research institution. Let's build an organization that will work with those entities and continue to scan the landscape for what's the next thing we need to do to be successful in building a life sciences and biotech community. Thus, what we talked about before, early investments in grant programs, but for applied research. And again, Don, we're not big money, right? NSF, NIH, these are the big money providers. Our money's built off leverage. We go in, we provide money. We have great teams here that do due diligence to understand the potential of those things. We put it in, and our money is always predicated on how to get the next money, whether it's through a grant program or through our loan program. So that was the original idea. And then, what we fast forward 40 years, I think the core mission of the center really hasn't changed. The ecosystem and the environment's changed a lot. But what makes it fun is how do you stay abreast of what that same question, what's the next thing that we need to do to ensure that our ecosystem is right for the next 20 years to keep benefiting. So, and the other thing that I did want to mention is that's really, really, really important as we celebrate 40 years is, we're a small organization. So it's not just the Biotech Center. I mean, the Biotech Center success is really built off the partnerships of the community, right? I mentioned this earlier. I got to see this as somebody who came into the ecosystem and has now been part of it. But I think the proactive perspective of North Carolina to do these things, hey, let's create a way to go get better at this, has inherently built this collaborative mentality, which is what the center's been built on. Partnership, partnership, partnership. How do we work together with other people to go achieve things? And that's really been the backbone of the center's success.
Not for this episode, but I think it'd be an interesting, sort of historical perspective to go all the way back and to look at I guess two elements that I have a feeling could have been, key moments as well for creating the center. One being, hey, look, all of these universities that are around North Carolina are creating all of these great things, and we're out licensing them, and they're leaving the state, and they're not coming back, and these jobs are leaving, and everything else.
Right.
We have the brain trust to create the whatever the fundamental science is, but unfortunately, we don't have the capability today to keep it here. That could be one. And then secondly, I could see, a whole bunch of maybe ideas that are stuck and maybe not being extracted out either. Typically universities have these out licensing sort of groups inside of them. And I would imagine even if you went back 60 years, they're probably the same exact thing at that point in time. And who knows, maybe there were a bunch of things that honestly people were saying, hey, look, these things are rotting on the shelf. And the reality is we have them and we need more people to take them and get to work with them, because the reality is they could impact lives and benefit people. And who knows? I mean, maybe one or two of those things would happen. But it certainly is a great transition point as well. For me to ask you, what do you see as next in life sciences, and what's on the horizon for North Carolina?
Yeah, and by the way, you're right on target, Don. So great observation. That was 100% what really kicked off the Biotech Center is we can innovate, right? How do we take those and keep them in North Carolina? And then as we're building the jobs, how do we keep those jobs in North Carolina? That really was the basis of the founding of the Biotech Center. What's next? So let me just riff right off of what you were just saying. While we have we've talked about kind of the diverse ecosystem, and that's really, especially as an economic developer, that's a really good platform for continued growth, because as one sector goes up and another one goes down, you can continue to sustain your community. And as things get more and more integrated, right, as the cross functionality between engineering, biology, and data science, that's going to really, I think North Carolina is going to really benefit from that, right? So we're also really good at data science and information science here, good engineering, given the manufacturing legacy. So I think the state, again, is really well primed for this convergence that's happening right now in life sciences as these things are coming together to solve problems. So how the center, again, thinks about all that and works with partners to ensure that we have policies that promote that we've got the right workforce in place to promote that we have the infrastructure in place to promote that we have enough capital to promote that. And that's the beauty of the center, is we get to go and probe all of that and then sit down together and think about it collectively, which I think is hard sometimes for individual institutions or organizations. They've got their silo. So that's one area we're going. Well, we're really good innovators, and we've talked about on the other end of the spectrum, kind of the product services side, really good in manufacturing and built up these really good service industries. We have work to do still in that middle section, the proverbial valley of death, right? How, right, even though we spent 40 plus years getting better at it, we can get better still. And the state's made some nice investments in the last few years around supporting dollars that can go into the universities, and not only the ones in and around the triangle, but statewide, to help build that, right? So we've got to attract more capital here. We're still a little behind in that space, so that's a place for us to focus. And then I think the last thing that I would mention that we alluded to a little bit earlier is this notion of a bioeconomy, right? And I don't want to get too far out. North Carolina will never be the place, making biofuels for the Department of Defense because of the feedstock challenges. But I do think we're going to continue to see an evolution of how biotechnology and the manufacturing process of that, whether it's purely bio-based or it's using tools to enhance other methodologies. But I think we're going to see this, right? We've seen it it's what we've watched happen over the last 20 to 30 years around biotherapeutics. And I think we're starting to see it in all proteins and food. We're going to see it in agriculture. We're going to see it start impacting. So positioning North Carolina, for all the reasons that we've discussed, it's a strong business-friendly state for manufacturing. In 20 years, I would love to see North Carolina be right in the center of this burgeoning bioeconomy, where bio-based systems are used for making all kinds of things, not only because we're good at it and we need to do it, but two, I think as an economic developer, the opportunity to expand job creation to communities that are outside our urban cores. We're doing some of that. But I think as you start making ag stimulants and you start making all proteins, the commercial manufacturing, as we build that, has the potential to be in places that don't have to be urban cores with a major university. So that's another big mission of the center, is to spread the benefits of life sciences economic impacts across our whole state. And I think bioeconomy's got a chance to do that.
Excellent. So let's focus a little bit on you. I have a few questions, just probing a little bit of your interest and your background. So what's the greatest leadership advice that you've ever received?
Greatest leadership advice I've ever received. I think it would revolve around, well, probably first, have a vision, right? I think if you're talking about being in leadership, have a vision that you're passionate about, because everything else is easier. As you can hopefully tell, as we talked about my core roots back to Mrs. Murphy, I really like biology and I think it has a lot of potential. So have a vision that enables your passion, build a great team. And I think that old adage of have a vision, build a great team, support them, and then get out of their way is actually pretty true. And I have the opportunity right now to do that. So that would probably be, I'm not sure that's one piece of advice, but it's an aggregate of good advice.
Absolutely. What inspires you?
It's funny you would ask me that. I was sitting at a meeting yesterday around a new workforce center, a biologics related to all our conversations, all this growth. So the potential to build a new workforce training center around biologics in one of our more rural communities. So it's very exciting. And I looked around the room and we had universities from across the state. We had community colleges from across the region. We had superintendent of the local school district. We had people from the community college board of trustees. We had the biotech center. And I made a statement at the end. I said, I'm so inspired by this, how we're all working together to make something happen. And that gets me back to this mentality that I feel here, right? Like when you were one of the poorest states not that long ago, you have to really work together to make things happen. And I think that's just been a great advantage. So I'm very inspired by the people in North Carolina and their motivation to work together for a common goal. It's very inspiring to me.
Well, thank you for sharing that. What concerns you?
I think what concerns me is the potential to be victims of our own success, right? That all those numbers that we've talked about require people. These are jobs we have to fill. It puts constraints on our infrastructure. So what we've done for 40 years, we have to keep doing, right? We've got to continue to be innovative and creative in our workforce development programs and support them and fund them. Or we won't meet the demands of the expectations that we've built. Especially, Don, when you're in the manufacturing world, it's infrastructure intensive, right? Mm. So water access, wastewater treatment, just transportation. We're a growing community. The communities in North Carolina are net in-migration communities, right? As an economic developer, right? Utilities, like these things that we need to continue to build strategies around is what keeps me up at night a little bit, ensuring that we have all those things in place to really accommodate the growth that we already can see and to do all the things you and I have talked about of all the things that could come.
Yeah, I just think about all the things that I don't typically have to worry about. Like, you're attracting all the talent to the state, whether they're in the state, now or new to the state. They have to have housing. They have to have places to go. In addition to that, they have to have roadways to get there. Right. These are all the things that, thankfully there are other people in the world that think about these things, but they're probably very in tune with a lot of the things that you're doing as well, with economic development. So yeah, I could see that being a major concern, just overall that, hey, look, you want people to have overall a pleasant experience and want to stay and continue to grow things inside the state.
Yeah, and I will go back to this, and with all honesty, it's what's fun about it, and it's what's so uniquely fun about being at the biotech center, because you get to sit in a room where you've got people in the room whose job is to think about what's the next cool thing going on at the university around science, and somebody's saying, well, this is what the capital markets will fund and not fund, and our economic development team saying, well, you know, here's the infrastructure challenges. So to be able to sit back and to bring this conversation full circle, for a guy that likes science, who likes business, who likes politics, who likes economic development, who likes workforce, to be able to sit and think about, okay, that here we are, this is what's happening. What are we going to do next to get us to address all those issues? Because you can't just pick one and go and run. Not in our ecosystem. It's it's the two sides of the coin, but that's okay. I'll take the challenges and the fun any day.
Absolutely. What excites you?
Yeah, at our full circle conversation, sitting in Miss Murphy's class, just wonderment of the biology, and now to be able to sit here, I still feel like that kid looking at the future potential, especially here in North Carolina, off of this platform that we've built. We've got to address some of these challenges to figure it out, but I'm really, really excited about the potential of where we can go. In some ways we've come so far, but if you think about our conversation around AI and machine learning and quantum and how that's going to impact, you made a great point, Don, right? Just the technology innovation in manufacturing and where that's going to go, and the potential for us to make everything from pharmaceuticals to plastics to, anything you can think of through these regenerative systems, is exciting to me as a human being. It's really exciting to me as somebody who gets to do economic development around life sciences in North Carolina because of the foundation that we built here to go do it. So that's what's pumping me up and getting me up in the morning right now and keeping me hanging around.
Well, I hope that a part of your message too hits home for any educators that happen to listen or watch the podcast, right? Because I feel like one of the key threads that's been there all along is that you've had this inspiration in terms of one of the main educators in your life leading to this life that now sort of contributes to lots of other lives as well. And I do feel like, so many times the people that are around us, the people we surround ourselves with, oftentimes we're inspired in one way or another by the education that they received. And, I'm glad that it led you to the place that you are. Bill Bullock, thank you so much for being on the Life Science Success podcast. And it's great to have you, talk about all of these things and the overall impact that NCBiotech is having in your area.
Well, Don, thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate the chance to talk about this. I know maybe it's a little outside the confines of your normal world, but it's been a blast, and I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you today. Thanks so much.
Thank you.